and will be posted onto our YouTube page. Therefore, those of you who do not wish to be seen, please feel free to turn your videos off now. To avoid any disruptions during the talk, as always, could you please ensure that your microphones are kept on mute throughout the talk, please? There will be a Q&A session after the talk, and if you'd like to ask a question, please either pop it into the chat or put your hand up using the Zoom icon. That'd be fantastic. To give everyone a chance to ask their question, if you could keep to one question and one question only, that'd be great, brethren. Thank you. We are once again giving away 2 of our very highly sought after bespoke mugs. For a chance of winning, please answer the following question. Which UK government cabinet member was partying with Matthew at his stag weekend? Please type your answers in the chat section, and as always, the first 2 quickest on the mark will win. Brethren, it's now my pleasure to introduce you to Worship Brother Matthew Roger Christmas. Matthew was initiated in Apollo University Lodge, number 357 in Oxford on the 25th of Feb, 1989, aged just 21, and was raised on the 3rd of June, 1989. He's also a past master of the Lodge of Honour and Generosity, number 165, and of 2 other London lodges. Matthew is an installed second principal of his Holy Royal Arch chapter, Apollo University chapter number 357, a past master and the secretary of the University Lodge of Master Masons, number 55, and a past provincial Grand Senior Warden of the province of Oxfordshire. He's also a past Commander Noah and the scribe of the Oxford University Lodge of Royal Ark Mariner, number 55, and a holder of Royal Ark Mariner provincial grand rank. He is a past thrice illustrious master of the Royal Select Masters. He's also a member of the Allied Masonic degrees and the Order of the Secret Monitor and the Operatives. In the Christian orders, Matthew is a past provincial Grand Warden in the Provincial Grand Lodge of the Cotswolds, Royal Order of Scotland, a past preceptor and the preceptory of the Cour de Lion number 29. He's a Knights Templar and a past provincial herald, a past most wise sovereign of the Grand Met chapter of Princes Rose Choir number 1, and his first general of the Oxford and Cambridge University chapter number 45. He is 30th degree. He is the most current puissant sovereign of the University Conclave 468 of the Red Cross of Constantine. He's also a Knight Templar priest and a member of the District number 16 display team working the KTP appendant degrees. Matthew has written sequicentennial histories for 2 of his Masonic units and is working on a 3rd for his Royal Ark Mariner Lodge. He has written articles on ritual and degrees for Freemasonry today and has lectured on rites and ritual connections around the world or around the country. He is a former board member of the Royal Masonic Trust for Girls and Boys. Matthew is a former teacher of history and classics and headmaster. He is now head of stakeholder engagement at a leading educational charity. He has an MA from the University of Oxford and is a former major in the Territorial Army within the Royal Regiment of Artillery. Worshipful Brother Matthew, headmaster, the floor is yours.
Well, no longer headmaster, but anyway, thank you very much, Amit. As usual, one doesn't recognise oneself at all when people talk about you. I'm going to share my screen for the presentation and then you can see me later on. So I'll just go on and do that. Can everyone see the screen?
Yeah.
Yep, great. Okay, well, first of all, thank you all very much indeed for attending tonight or watching the video, and also to Amit and Mihir for organising it. I think most of us have found the Freemasons Without Borders weekly sessions to be a great education under lockdown, and I've learned a lot from the talks and the questions and discussions afterwards. I hope you enjoy what follows, but if you don't, you can just quietly slip away. Many Masons are initiated, passed and raised in the 3 craft or blue degrees. They hold office in their lodge and they might go through the chair without ever wanting to pursue Freemasonry further. That is all, and of course, that's entirely fine. But on the other hand, at some point, and there is no right time, Many of us desire further Masonic knowledge, but it can be very hard to know what to do about that, particularly if you're a relatively new Mason. In England and Wales, one hears talk at festive boards of this or that degree or order. As you listen with interest, you find there is much talk of side degrees or higher degrees. What is meant by them? There will be tantalizing references to Rose Croix, or Knights Templar, or even on its 10th anniversary, the Scarlet Cord. Just what are they about? In addition, your Masonic friends and mentors may well be very keen that you join another degree of their own particular interest. And so you do. And then another. And before you know it, you're in quite a few randomly. You may just want to suck it and see, as the 60s proverb has it. Nothing wrong with that. But there may be a way of looking at it all more comprehensively so that you can find a route that best suits you. Now, this is obviously a very international gathering, so I'm very keen to make 4 caveats at the beginning. Number 1, as I discuss degrees and orders, I'm not going to be explaining the rituals, as I'm conscious of our obligations and also would hate to spoil anything for any of you who have not yet become part of any of them. And rest assured, though, even though I will say a few things about the working, it'll be a lot less than you can find on most of those bodies' websites or in their publications. Caveat number 2. For those watching and listening who are in other degrees, I may not mention your favourite. I may just possibly not be in it. That is even possible. And then caveat number 3. I'm looking at what's available in England and Wales. There'll be lots of similarities in other constitutions, but it won't be the same even in Scotland or in Ireland. It'll be very different in Europe and the Americas, not least where there are specific rites like the Swedish rite or the York rite. I have some understanding of these, and I'm very happy to talk about them in the Q&A period. But with the limited time available, this talk is centred on the degrees and orders as practised by English and Welsh Masons and by those under the English district system. That said, I hope that my later pathways are applicable to all Masons in terms of making sense of what is out there. And probably most importantly, my views are very much my own. I've got no authority to speak for the Grand Lodge of England, Supreme Grand Chapter, other grand bodies out of, say, Mark Mason's Hall or the Supreme Council of the Ancient Accepted Rite or any other at home and abroad. These are not my these are official thoughts, these are not official thoughts, they're only mine. And obviously, even then, I have to be a bit careful. So may I make a very specific point at the start? It's a real bugbear of mine, so you'll need to indulge me. And you will hear even very senior Masons getting this wrong. We shouldn't talk of the many degrees or orders out there as higher degrees or side degrees. Most Masons make this mistake from the start. And in fact, side degrees is not only inaccurate, but also I think it always sounds a little bit dismissive. I'm going to go back to basics for England and Wales, which informs my particular attitude, both to the naming of degrees and also to the Royal Arch. So, as defined by the Book of Constitutions, issued by United Grand Lodge of England, pure and ancient Masonry consists of the 3 degrees of Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason, as well as the Order of the Holy Royal Arch. The 2 English women's Grand Lodges may have a different attitude, but not radically. It is different for co-Masonry, and it is different in some respects outside the British Isles. But under the Grand Lodge, of which I'm a member, no other degrees can be higher for a craft Mason, whatever number they have. They are, in fact, to a craft Mason, additional degrees and orders, or extra craft degrees and orders. 1 or 2 may genuinely be side degrees. Most are decidedly not. But that's something we can discuss later in the Q&A. And there are lots of charts, such as this one for England and Wales, but I'm not sure they help much, except to say, firstly, what orders you have to be in to join another order, and secondly, whether you have to have a particular faith to join one. These charts tend to be pretty overwhelming as they imply some sort of Masonic connections. And if we look at this one for the United States of America, or these two, I'm not sure they would help you decide whether you should join an order in the USA. My genuine and key theme is that there is no one correct path or order of degrees that you should take. Should I go to the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Is straight on somehow wrong? But I believe there are different strands of Masonic learning if you want to make a considered ritual choice. England and Wales, of course, you can do what you want, as there is no agreed pathway or progressive system. And in constitutions where there may be some flexibility, as with the York Rite, as to what you join when. But don't forget, even these rites are much the product of historical chance, as they are of deliberate construction. It's only in countries such as Sweden, or even very unusual in Bristol, with its unique Baldwin Rite, where there is any real sense of a specific planned rite of degrees that are logical in terms of progression. Yet, certainly, say, for instance, in Sweden or Denmark, they have this at the expense of many of the degrees which lots of us here will know and love. However, it's my strong contention that the first body one should join in England and Wales, and ideally elsewhere, where it's possible, after being raised as a Master Mason, is that of the Holy Royal Arch, by joining a Royal Arch chapter. Others will, with good cause, disagree. But there are three reasons why I think as I do. Firstly, the United Grand Lodge of England, the Supreme Grand Chapter, are virtually the same body. And it seems odd to join another Masonic order without being fully in possession of pure and ancient Masonry. This consists of the 3 craft degrees as well as the Order of the Holy Royal Arch. It's different in Scotland, Ireland, and other constitutions, but for a variety of political and historical reasons, far too dull to discuss here, when the 2 rival English Grand Lodges joined together in 1813 to form the United Grand Lodge of England, this became the position. So on that basis alone in England and Wales, I think the Royal Arch should be your first port of call. And a chapter may even be connected with your lodge. Secondly, many see the Royal Arch as the completion of the 3rd degree. The 3rd degree being when the word is lost at the very time when the temple is being completed. In the Royal Arch, the secrets are found when the 2nd temple is built on the site of the former. In addition, the Royal Arch is also a most impressive ceremony. And the moment when light was restored to me is one of those Masonic moments that I will never forget. And for those constitutions where the veils are used, I would hate to miss it, having had the privilege of observing that aspect during a Rite of Baldwin meeting as a visitor and in the USA. Thirdly, and I believe most important with respect to this talk, the idea of lost knowledge, which can be rediscovered by the diligent Mason, is one of the fundamental foundations upon which pure ancient Masonry is constructed. And it's fundamental in many of the other orders out there. So one needs to appreciate that ritual context and come to understand over time what the lost secrets or word represent for us on our Masonic journey. So while there is nothing higher than Craft or Royal Arch, as they reveal completely what some call the secrets of Masonry, what the additional extra craft or other orders and degrees teach are these secrets, but in a series of different ways and with a wide variety of contrasting approaches. My apologies for the history lesson, but I will keep it brief. The other degrees began to appear in England, at least in the 1750s, way after the craft and Royal Arch were established here. They were, by and large, the product of enthusiastic Masons, particularly in France, keen to extend their Masonic ideas and experiences. Literally, thousands of degrees were invented, and many of them were practiced, even if some of them only for a while. Only those degrees thought to be worthwhile have survived, and these are flourishing today. New orders also emerge from time to time, and their success and their longevity is for the future. Other old degree workings are revived. Now, 2 points have to be understood now. Firstly, the fact that the United Grand Lodge has no jurisdiction over these other orders. Only the Craft and the Royal Arch are run by the United Grand Lodge of England, by Supreme Grand Chapter, both administered from Freemasons Hall in Great Queen Street, London. The additional orders in England and Wales are administered by other bodies. However, although Grand Lodge does not recognise them formally, that doesn't mean that you can't join them. Indeed, very many senior craft Freemasons are very active in these orders also. To be admitted to them, you must at least be a Master Mason, although some demand more than this. Several, rightly, also require that you have joined chapter, as they build on what you have learned when you exalted to the Royal Arch. Secondly, I must state what these additional degrees are certainly not. Whilst there are many parallels and connections between them, and while some of them fit together rather well, these additional degrees in England and Wales are not part of a large progressive system with, for instance, entered apprentice in the first degree at the bottom and a sovereign grand inspector general 33rd degree at the top. That's even the case with the ancient and accepted rite, even though the 33rd degree is at the top of that rite. But it's not the top degree in Freemasonry. That is the Master Mason. The degree numbers may be high, the titles may be long and grand, but it's what each degree teaches you that's important, not its number. System, and most can be joined in any order. As we know, other constitutions do things differently, and we don't do it like this in the British Isles. Of the 21 main extra craft degrees in England and Wales, and that number of 21 is a huge value judgment by me, as I've not included some of the very rare or esoteric orders, and I can't discuss all of them anyway. 11 of these demand that their members profess the Trinitarian Christian faith and are in some ways identifiable as orders of Masonic chivalry, while 8 others are mainly based around stories from the Old Testament. Of these Old Testament degrees, as you would expect, many are concerned with the building of a temple in Jerusalem and with events in and around it. In England and Wales, in addition to Craft and Chapter run from Freemasons Hall in Covent Garden, the separate degrees of Mark Master Mason and the Royal Art Mariner are run by the Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons, based in Mark Mason's Hall, St James's Street in London. The Grand Master of these 2 degrees is His Royal Highness Prince Michael of Kent, the younger brother of His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent, who is the Craft Grand Master. The Grand Secretary of Mark Grand Lodge also looks after 8 other groups of degrees or orders, each with their own separate heads. These are the Order of Royal and Select Masters, otherwise known as the Cryptic Rite, 6 degrees. The Allied Masonic degree is 5, although very different from the large number under the AMD in the USA. The Order of the Secret Monitor, 3 degrees. The Order of the Scarlet Cord, 6 grades. The Order of the Red Cross of Constantine, Christian, 5 degrees and orders. United Orders of the Knights Templar and Knights of Malta, Christian, 3 degrees. The Order of Knights Beneficent of the Holy City, known as the CBCS, Christian, 3 degrees. All are completely separate groups of degrees, but over time have been administered by Mark Grand Lodge purely from convenience. As you can see from the way they now portray themselves, it's all made to look very similar with the same sort of branding. But that is, of course, a commercial subterfuge. There is one other, by which I mean large membership order, run from London at Duke Street, St James, and that's the Ancient and Accepted Rite, Christian, run by a Supreme Council, which of course is not Christian in other parts of the world. Other jurisdictions often refer to it as the Scottish Rite. This has 33 degrees, although unlike elsewhere, in England and Wales, only 5 are ever conferred. The others are sometimes demonstrated. The first conferred degree is the 18th degree, Knight of the Pelican and Eagle and Sovereign Prince Rose Choir of Herodom, known for short as the Rose Choir, and therefore the whole order is often referred to as the Rose Choir. In England and Wales, having gone through the chair of a Rose Choir chapter, one is eligible for the 30th degree. The 31st, 32nd and 33rd degrees are only conferred for long service to the order. But if we look at other ones, we will now see what's on offer. The Royal Order of Scotland, with its 2 degrees, is controlled from the Grand Lodge in Edinburgh. This is a Christian order. And brethren able to join one of its various provincial Grand Lodges situated in England and Wales and elsewhere. The Order of Holy Royal Arch Knight Templar Priests and Order of Holy Wisdom, Christian, is run by Grand College in York and also controls 33 different degrees, although only 2, the ones you see on there, are conferred. The others are only sometimes demonstrated. The Worship Society of Freemasons, Rough Masons, Walkers, Slaters, Paviors, Plasterers and Bricklayers, the operatives, was founded in 1913 with the aim of perpetuating the sort of ceremonies supposedly practiced by the original operative Masons. And this has 7 degrees. And then we have Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia, SRRA or SOC Ros. It's not a Masonic body as such, but considers itself a society of Christian Freemasons with interests in philosophy, science, and theosophy. It has 9 separate grades and exists in other jurisdictions such as Scotland and the USA. There are a variety of very selective orders in England and Wales, where membership is very much by invitation after many years' involvement with the other craft degrees. The 2 most famous are the August Order of Light and the Royal Order of Erie, and those who aren't in them know very little about them. There are also some relatively new orders, such as the Commemorative Order of St. Thomas of Conn, the Order of Pilgrim Preceptors, and the Order of Athelstan, which are growing in popularity. It's very difficult to navigate your way through all these different degrees. I'd like to suggest 3 routes which give some shape. I would suggest, for instance, that the Royal Order of Scotland and SOC Ros are certainly for the more experienced Mason and not a first step. I'd urge you to join the Royal Arch. Whether or not you do, I would then suggest you go to the Order of Mark Masons, also a key step in the York Rite, and where one can, the Fraternity of Royal Arch Mariners. These are a good starting point. The Mark is concerned with the role of the fellow craft. In some ways, it's a continuation of the 2nd degree, but it's in fact far more than that. There's a great deal of humour in the Mark degree, but also has one of the most profound messages in Freemasonry. The last message which the Master gives to the candidate is particularly moving. Also, some major orders require you to be both a Master Mason and a Mark Master Mason. And this cartoon, of course, gives no genuine secrets away. As some of you will know, I have a particular love of the Royal Arch Mariner degree, which is connected but only administratively with the Mark in England. It dates from the 18th century, but its origins go back much further, and it's concerned with the mercy and providence of God after the Great Flood. It stands utterly alone among the other extra craft degrees, and it seems likely that its central character, the patriarch Noah, may be a precursor to Hiram Abiff, who has come to dominate our craft rituals. It's rarer outside the British Isles, and it's not easy to find in some jurisdictions. In the USA, for instance, one has to join the Allied Masonic degrees, and in Europe, unless one is under English, Scottish or Irish constitutions, you probably can't do this, alas. The very many degrees in many ways can be considered, I would suggest to you, of 3 basic types. The Solomonic degrees, the degrees of knighthood, and the degrees of priesthood. This is my own interpretation of the rituals and is not official. In addition, not every degree nor order or Masonic idea will conform to a simple set of pathways. But I put it out there to encourage debate about ritual connections. But it may help us more looking at the charts we have seen, however well laid out, or better than just following the trend and doing what your mates do. I would offer the view that it's worth approaching what you decide to join by considering most additional degrees as part of one or more distinct pathways to Masonic knowledge. And the further you go down the pathway, the more it will really start to make sense. The Solomonic degrees concern the temples at Jerusalem, the first built by King Solomon, and the deeds and actions of Old Testament figures associated with the later temple or other key aspects of Israelitish history, such as the Ark of the Covenant. They're not all specifically about Solomon, but his work and life form the basis for the allegorical and symbolic journey which we've already started in the craft, and which the Royal Arch completes. That is, the search for Masonic light as exemplified in the search for the lost word within the context of the Old Testament. In England and Wales, this begins with the first 2 craft degrees, the Mark degree, and one or two others contained in the allied degrees and the cryptic rite of royal and select masters, before the loss of the word in the third degree. The journey to recover it then commences, involving many degrees, all contained in the allied degrees, the cryptic rite, and here, the ancient and accepted rite, before it's found in the Royal Arch. The Order of the Scarlet Cord also has a growing role in Old Testament Freemasonry. You'll be able to chart similar paths under your own Masonic constitutions, even if they don't simply follow one after the other in a particular rite. Some of these degrees are particularly impressive. I would rate extremely highly the experience I gained from being the candidate and then later conferring on others the degrees of Royal Master, the Red Cross of Babylon, and of course the Royal Arch itself. As we move to the degrees of knighthood, I thought I'd just start by highlighting this, my favourite Masonic picture, as it features my mother Lodge and my mother KT Preceptory, both in Oxford. What a day that must have been. And look how fantastic the Knights Templar look. But to move on. Many Masons flock to join the so-called Masonic Orders of Chivalry, and some are clearly desperate to give themselves honours, medals, stars, robes, sashes, baldricks, swords, and above all else, extravagant titles. My girlfriend can be a little sceptical at my chivalric Masonic titles. A Grand Elected Knight Kadosh, a Knight of the Black and White Eagle, a Knight of the United Religious, Military and Masonic Orders of the Temple of St. John of Jerusalem, Palestine, Rhodes and Malta, as well as a Knight of the Masonic and Military Order of the Red Cross of Constantine and of the Appendant Orders of the Holy Sepulchre and of St. John the Evangelist, etc., etc., etc. There is a reason why she affectionately nicknames us the Curly Cloakers, after she sewed a badge onto my KT mantle. And it's a big step when you show the person in your life your KT cloak. That said, I haven't dared show her my Knight Templar priest mitre. One can see why many people find Masons quite absurd. If it is the kit and the titles which matter to some Masons, then I can see why. It's rather like kids getting costumes out of the dressing up box. For adults, surely we should be beyond that. Now, this is controversial. Once the craft was de-Christianized following the 723 constitutions of Anderson, there is no doubt that many Masons wanted to create Masonic systems which championed the Christian faith. The Royal Order of Scotland makes this clear when the candidate is first received, that the order was to correct the so-called errors and abuses which had crept into the 3 craft degrees. And it's the older set of rituals after the craft and Royal Arch. Secondly, there's no doubt that many Masons also want to give Freemasonry a link with ancient Rome. In doing so, they developed the wonderful complete rite that is the Order of the Red Cross of Constantine. Others desired roots in the romance of the Crusades, and particularly that order which still today fascinates people and is the catalyst of so many weird and wonderful theories, the Knights Templar. There was also the Knights of Malta too, and more recently the Order of St. Thomas Aquin. The 18th degree, Prince Rose Choir and Knight of the Pelican and Eagle, and later degrees of the ancient and accepted rite are preeminently degrees of knighthood too. Certainly from the 1730s, a number of degrees of the Christian background appeared in France and gradually spread all over Europe before crossing the Channel to the British Isles. Suffice it to say that all of these degrees of knighthood with their long names are relatively modern creations with no claim to be the descendants of the Roman or Crusading orders. So what is their point? Is there more to them than dressing up, grand titles, and the wish for ancient roots? Clearly, yes. In the Solomonic degrees, a candidate is engaged in an allegorical and symbolic journey, as expressed in his search for Masonic light in the quest for the lost word. So also in the various degrees of knighthood, Masons become pilgrims and Christian knights seeking to reinterpret the search for that word in a Christian sense. Whilst all Masons must acknowledge the universality of Freemasonry and accept that the craft and the Royal Arch contain all the essential secrets, the Christian degrees of knighthood do reflect the need which many Christians feel to interpret those secrets in a Trinitarian sense. This is far more important than being dubbed with a sword, being given a new apron or sash, and declared a knight, albeit the ritual clothing of the newly admitted is important as it is in other degrees. For those who are not Trinitarian Christians, I would point you towards the Order of the Secret Monitor, and indeed the ancient accepted rite in countries where it's not Christian, as well as the 2 degrees in the Allied Masonic degrees, Knight of Constantinople, one of the very few genuine side degrees, as well as the Red Cross of Babylon that I mentioned earlier. These in many ways offer a non-Christian knightly approach. The Red Cross of Babylon is but widely agreed to be an important degree with some deep initiatory elements involving the crossing of the bridge. There is a wonderful Irish order working in England and Wales and across the world, which focuses specifically on this, the chivalric order of Knight Masons, which has 3 degrees. So Freemasonry, of course, is most certainly not a religion and does not try to be one. Those in the important degrees of priesthood are certainly not set themselves up to be priests, and they can claim no sacerdotal or sacramental rights, even if, as in at least one degree, as I've alluded, a mitre is worn. So what are they all about? Again, ignoring the dressing up, what's important is that the degrees of priesthood bring us to the high realms in terms of Masonic thought, with candidates ritually purifying themselves and dedicating themselves to the service of the deity. As the introduction to the ritual of Grand High Priest makes clear, the candidate who is admitted is left in no doubt that he is set apart for high duties and responsibilities in life, both as a Mason and as a man. He is taught that to carry them out, he is called upon to dedicate himself to the service of the Most High God, and also to that of his fellow men. There are basically 4 priesthood degrees, 2 reserved for Trinitarian Christians and 2 open to Masons of all faiths. Of the latter, the least developed in terms of ritual and yet the most well known is, of course, that of the 3rd principle in the Holy Royal Arch chapter. The candidate elected to the 3rd principle's chair is installed as representing Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest. However, despite the Holy Order of Grand High Priest being one of the most ritualistically important of the 5 Allied Masonic degrees, and in Masonry as a whole, in my contention, it is much less well known than the role of the 3rd principle. Perhaps not least as candidates have to be a Master Mason, a Marked Master Mason, and also in the Royal Arch. Christian Masons had the opportunity to take Old Testament Masonry further and interpret it with their faith. Those in the Red Cross of Constantine, who are active in their conclave, will, the year before they go to the chair, be given the degree of Priest Mason and be consecrated as a representation of Eusebius in preparation for the following year's responsibilities of assuming the Masonic throne of Constantine. There is also the separate and highly prized Masonic order of Holy Royal Arch Knight Templar Priests. This is concerned exclusively with the sacerdotal office of dedication and service. The fact that KTP candidates must be Knights Templar and an installed master in the craft means this order remains relatively small. There is no doubt that when you strip away some of the expensive regalia, when you ignore the many irrelevant and frankly contrived signs which are never used outside the candidate ceremony, and when you forget the actual title of some of the degrees, I ask you, Super Excellent Master? Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's a Super Excellent Master. Or Knight of the Brazen Serpent? Or perhaps, most remarkable of all, Mystic Order Veiled Prophets of the Enchanted Realm, and instead focus on the ritual of the degrees themselves, then you will find much on which to reflect. As Freemasons, we are called upon to make a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. And I've learned so much that puts the craft degrees into a greater perspective of my participation in other Masonic orders. As you appreciate, this evening I've only scratched the surface and not done enough on jurisdictions outside of England and Wales. If you don't want to go further with the extra craft degrees, then fine. But if you do, and you undertake some research, I doubt you'll regret it. We're all on a Masonic journey, and there are many paths to follow as we walk the roads we choose. As J.R.R. Tolkien has Bilbo say, as he leaves the Shire for the last time in the Fellowship of the Ring. The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now, far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet, until it joins some larger way where many paths and errands meet. And whither then, I cannot say. And the choice you make, of course, on your journey is up to you. Thank you for listening. I'm happy now to answer questions and discuss ideas if you'd like me to do so. And as ever, I'll learn more from you than you from me. Thank you.
Matthew, thank you so much. Fascinating. I think we'll have to watch it back again just to take it all in, to be honest with you. Amazing. Thank you very much. Can we first go to Giovanni, please?
Hi, Matthew. Very, very, very interesting presentation. Just a quick question. At the beginning, you show some of the orders, and one of them was the Red Cross. What is the difference between Red Cross and the Red Cross of Constantine?
Okay, well, very different indeed. The Rose Croix is part of the ancient accepted rite of 33 degrees, and that is a very old rite. I mean, some of the first manuscripts of that are the Franken manuscripts, about 1725. So they're extremely, it's an extremely old set of degrees, which was transferred to America, particularly in the northern jurisdiction, which then gave it to England and Wales, although the southern jurisdiction in America is much larger. The Rose Croix, the whole set of 32 degrees, is a hugely complicated set of degrees. And in fact, after the 18th degree, I'm not sure there is really much ritual connection that really works between the 19th and the 30th. And that's why England and Wales, those degrees are never, from 1929, have never worked. The Red Cross of Constantine is a complete rite of 3 degrees with 2 other orders attached to it, which also make a lot of sense. They are more modern, although actually they are old. The Red Cross was formed, the conclave, in 1865, the Grand Conclave. So there are also an awful lot of degrees with the words Red Cross in the title, which still exist, and those which don't. And I think that, for instance, I think there's a lot that comes from the Christian. I think it comes from the Christian early origins of Freemasonry. Certainly, to finish the question, in England, if you join the Red Cross of Constantine, it's a complete rite of 3 degrees with 2 attached, and it's complete in itself. If you join the ancient accepted rite, you're joining a much larger international sort of set of degrees, and they are a bit of a mismatch, and that's because historically they have changed a lot. From 25 degrees to 33 degrees, bits have gone in, bits have gone out, and they're different across the world. I mean, they've been de-Christianized in many parts of the world, so that so it's now a universal order. Although that's not the case in England and Wales, and it's not the case in the USA either. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Matthew. You know, I joined the Red Cross of Constantine, and this is why I wanted to know what was the difference between one and the other.
They're both the Red Cross Knight and the Rose Croix Perfectee are pursuing, trying to find the lost words. So in that respect, you know, they're both parts of Christian knighthood, or parts of knighthood if they're non-Christianized, in pursuit of knowledge. And they both have elements of knighthood in them, dubbing with a sword, solemn oaths. So in that respect, they are, and they both originate, if you like, from times of war. So there is some connection there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni. Next, could we please go to Jeff Gill? Jeff?
There we go. Hey, Matthew.
Hello.
Congratulations. Great overview of the orders. just on one point, the additional Rose Choir degrees, as you rightly say, aren't practiced, but they are demonstrated, aren't they? Each year.
Well, not above the 19th, they're not.
No, that's true. Up to the 18th, that's quite correct. When you originally set this out, I mean, you said you could break it down into roughly 3 areas: Solomonic, chivalric, and the priestly orders. I'm just being a devil's advocate here.
Oh, please.
Probably the esoteric orders would possibly be another one, because I do know lots of Masons who only join the craft to get into the esoteric orders. And that kind of leads you into quite a broad field once you, I mean, the normal starting point, I guess, would be the SRIA, and then go beyond into, well, gosh, without naming them, I can think of about 8 off the top of my head. But that's just another avenue. But I do appreciate, again, that's for more experienced Masons, unless they've got a particular bent.
I mean, I agree with you. I could have talked about esoteric Masonry as a 4th channel. I didn't, partly because I think, as you've said, they're very experienced Masons. And I would suggest that perhaps 75% of Masons would not enjoy Soc Ros, which is, if you like, the most obvious and entry-level esoteric Masonic society. I also think you have to be a bit careful when you look at esoteric Masonry. There's a lot of weird and wacky stuff out there, some of it which is not even recognized by esoteric Masons, and I think you can get trapped. You can get trapped into that, and I think you need to have a mentor. And I've talked with you about it, for instance, and that's been very helpful. Somebody who knows about it before you ever decide to go down that route. I mean, I was talking with Colin Jackson the other day, and he talked about there is a specifically Jewish order I hadn't even heard of, just for Jewish Masons, and there are a couple of Muslim orders just for Muslim Masons. And again, I didn't know about that. He knows them from his days in Leicester, but because they're hard to find even on the internet, I didn't mention them specifically, because I think that is that's a particular speciality. I've mentioned the degrees of knighthood slightly uncomfortably, because I think most of them are Christian in England and Wales, and that is, of course, is a divisive issue, and it's worthy of discussion. It's in many ways the elephant in the room in lots of discussions about Masonic orders, that some of them are restricted to a certain faith, but I thought I couldn't ignore them, whereas I don't feel I know nearly enough about the Jewish-only order. I only know its name. And I don't know anything about them, but they're very old Muslim orders of Masonry. So again, I didn't want to talk about them. And Esoterica, I think, is if that's your boat, you will, through Masonry, find people who are into it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Next, could we go to Lester, please?
Hello there, Matthew. Lovely presentation. You mentioned, just on a side note, that your other half would be fairly shocked at your mitre for KTP. Totally know where you're coming from, because that was one of the things that nearly stopped me going into KTP. I didn't want to look silly wearing that hat, but there you go. That's by the by. I'm about to go in the chair of KT, Knights Templar. Last night I was being a sad old sausage and looking at the statutes. And I noticed that the qualification for candidates into KT is that it's a Master Mason, Royal Archmason, and a Christian. It doesn't actually state Trinitarian Christian, whereas most of the time, when you ask about, can I join KT, the majority of people say you have to be a Christian of the Trinitarian faith. So where does that actually come from then, if it's not in the statutes 101?
Well, going back to your first bit, I mean, I think she wouldn't be shocked by the mitre. She would just absolutely rip me to pieces for it. And of course, it put me off for a long time too. And if you get higher in the order, the mitre gets even bigger. And I have to say, it's the one bit of the order I don't particularly enjoy.
I'm going in chair next year.
Yeah,
as well.
I feel a bit of a fraud, and I think it gives people the wrong idea. But going back to your question, I mean, I wasn't aware of that. As you and I both know the ceremony very well, and lots of people here will, I would say it is very clearly Trinitarian in its theology. So I think if I was a non-Trinitarian Christian, it wouldn't make as much sense if I was, say, a Unitarian Christian. Of course, there aren't many, I mean, I suppose most Christian churches would describe themselves as Trinitarian. I do know people, for instance, who are, you know, Jews by birth and fairly accepting by daily faith, who've joined the Christian degrees, but I think they leave them a bit cold. So I don't know the answer to your question, Lester, I'm afraid, and I need to find that out. You've set quite a lot going.
Well, funny you should mention that, Matthew, because I'm actually Jewish by birth.
Yeah.
But I was brought up as a Christian in the Trinitarian faith anyway. But it was just it was only last night I was looking at that statute, and I thought, well, why doesn't it actually state Trinitarian in the statutes if that is the common known qualification?
I don't know. If you're brought up as a Christian, obviously, then it's going to make perfect sense, whatever your original family faith. But I think if you are somebody who could have, if you are somebody, I mean, anyone can join a Masonic Christian order if they say they're prepared to accept Trinitarianism. But I think if you don't actually really believe in it, I think it's a bit of a nonsense, and it will make the ceremony less good. And obviously there are, some of these degrees have been completely de-Christianized in other constitutions, and I can't speak for them because although I've seen some of the rituals, I've not been the candidate, and that's really hard to know, isn't it? It's a bit like, you know, you can't learn a game by reading the rules. You have to play it, and of course you can't go back and be a knight and be, let's say, a Rose Croix Mason again, having not gone through the Christian route. But I'm sure those Rose Croix Masons in universal Masonry have got huge things out of the perfection ceremony. But it wouldn't be the same for me.
Thank you very much, Matthew.
Thank you, Lester. Next, could we go to Ted, please? Hi, Ted. I think you're on mute. There you go.
Yes, I was on mute. Sorry about that. I wonder if you would identify, as we do in the States, certain ones are invitational, and that you just can't follow the path.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think, I think there's two sorts of invitational, isn't there? There are some where you let it be known that you'd quite like to be in it, and if the right person hears that and they like you and they think you're Masonically sound, you'll probably get in unless there is some sort of order qualification. So, for instance, the Royal Order of Scotland, for a long time, one couldn't join metropolitan counties unless you were 30th degree and a Grand Officer in one of the recognised Grand Lodges, even though that's not the stipulation for any other Royal Order of Scotland Provincial Grand Lodge. I think certainly in England, you don't get into the August Order of Light easily. In fact, a lot of people have no idea, you know, where it meets, although it has expanded. I think the Order of Eri is restricted. You've got to be a 5th grade in the Soc Ros to become Order of Eri. So it's very, very hard, and people don't know much about it. And I think it also depends where in the country you are. In England and Wales, certainly, in some parts of the country, you don't get into certain things unless you are very well known. Some counties, provinces are, you know, very restricted by the nature of who the provincial Grand Master is and who the other provincial rulers are. So I don't think we have any. It's easy across the country to give you an answer to that, Ted. Actually,
Yes, that's a pretty good answer.
Thank you, Ted. Always good to see you. Matthew, we've got a couple more before we call it a day. Can I next go to Jocelyn, please? Hi, Jocelyn.
Good evening. Excellent lecture. I would just like to add a bit to what we are talking about, universal and Christian, different areas. because I personally know the case of a gentleman who was in the UK, and he was not allowed admission to the Rosy Croix, I mean the A&AR in UK. And after very many years, his son took the chair in Bombay. So at that time, he came down to India and got admitted to the A&AR. But then when he went back to UK, he was invited to an A&AR lodge because he had already taken the degree.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like a real mess, you know, like you're not allowed. You go and take it somewhere else. You come back, hey, you know everything, so welcome, you know.
Yeah, I think there are, I mean, there's the question of Masonic recognition is incredibly difficult, isn't it? And what if you, and you see that in the Royal Arch with the veils and the excellent master degree. Yeah. And again, I think it will depend on the jurisdiction and the particular order, whether or not they let you in or not. I mean, yeah, there's always going to be those cases. And I mean, I think there's a good case to be had for the ancient accepted rite not being considered a Christian order, apart from, in fact, I think you could argue the 18th degree and perhaps the 17th, Knights of the East and West. I think in most of the other degrees are not Christian. But they are in a Christian order, but they're not Christian. And in fact, you see that people are desperate to change the names of them. So the degree, the 9th degree and the 10th degree, which are basically about vengeance and about the hunting down and killing of the murderers of Hiram, is a very uncomfortable idea. And in both the northern and the southern jurisdictions of the United States, that's not what it's about, really. And if you read, say, Pike and others, you will see they've changed what it's about. And a lot of the, I think a lot of the American, in America, lots of the degrees of the Scottish Rite have been rewritten to be patriotic or to be against autocracy, because those are the values of the United States. And you see that the northern jurisdiction degrees are very different from the southern jurisdiction degrees. So I mean, I know an apocryphal story of when Northern Masonic senior Masons came across to witness higher degrees of the accepted rite, and apparently said to the Supreme Council, "Wow, where did you get these amazing degrees from?" And they said, "We got them from you 125 years ago, but you don't work them anymore." So I mean, you know, there's all kinds of changes that happen. So I think calling the Scottish Rite, whether it's in Britain or elsewhere, as Christian is more about the admission requirements than about the actual degrees themselves, which are in most cases not Christian.
Thank you.
Lovely, thanks, Jocelyn. Could we next go to Ian Currans, please? Hi, Ian.
Hi, thank you very much again, Matthew. When we listened to this talk on Friday under the Oxford Light Blues, we were discussing the additional degrees which the women's orders confer. I think we know what HFAF do, but we weren't sure what OWF do, were we? And I think we've got one or two senior OWF Masons here this evening. I wondered if we could get a comment from them about what progressive orders they do.
It would be great to know, Ian. I understand OWF progressive orders are much more tightly organised in terms of the route, as opposed to HFAF ones. But if there's anyone here from OWF, we'd love to hear from you.
I think there may be.
I know that when we were speaking to someone from OWF before, they stated that you had to take the certain side degrees in a certain order.
You do.
Yeah, you had to go into Mark, you had to then go into chapter, and all the way along the line. I think it was about 7 steps before you got anywhere near KT. So that wouldn't have suited me, even with a dress on.
Yeah, I think that's ironic, of course, as the whole schism that led to there being 2 female Grand Lodges was to do with a quarrel over the Royal Arch and other degrees. And it's ironic that I think, and they can correct me, that the OWF was the order that was most strict on that and has now embraced them and made them very, very strict. but I could be wrong, and I wouldn't want to interfere in those two Grand Lodges' internal politics.
Thanks, Ian. Hopefully
Thank you.
if somebody comes on, then we'll happily.
Yeah. Thank you.
Could we next go to Jorge, please? Jorge?
Hello.
Hello.
Great,
We can
great
hear you.
lecture, Matthew. Could you please repeat the demands, the requirements to go to the order of Uri? Order of
Which one? Which one?
Order of Red Branch of Uri.
Oh, the Royal Branch of Erie.
Yeah, please.
Well, it's certain for the Red Branch, the Royal Red Branch of Erie. You've certainly got to be in the Soc Ros. I thought it was 5th grade Adeptus Minor and above, but I saw in the chat that Jeff thinks it's the 7th grade, and I don't know, as I'm not that high, that senior in it. So, but you certainly got to be in England and Wales. You've got to be in the Rosicrucian Society in order to do the Red Branch of Erie, and it's a certain level within there. Whereas that's different, for instance, in America, where that is not the case. It's, I understand, more of an honorary degree for service to the right, York Rite and others.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Right, brethren, that brings us to the end. Thank you all very much for your attention and for joining us on the call today. We really do appreciate it. Just a couple of things before I go. Matthew, you have started a wonderful session in the chat room there. There's a lot of brethren there. You've invoked a lot of thoughts, I think. So there's some good talk going on in there. Just going back to the winners for the mug, we've got Rob Waldron and Stephen Tucker. Well done. You were 2 quickers off the mark. Matthew, what's the answer?
It's Michael Gove, who 30 odd years ago was extremely good at paintballing. May I tell you?
Wonderful. Excellent. Do you still keep in touch?
We are in touch, although we disagree on almost every political matter, but we are still in touch. Yes, we are. Just not politically at all. But I'll keep off that in this forum.
Brilliant. Thank you. Brethren, once again, thank you all very much for joining us. Next week, we're on at the same time, 6 o'clock, and we will have Most Eminent and Supreme Knight Paul Clement, Grand Master of the Knights Templar and Knights of Malta. So further details will be posted onto the Facebook group, and I hope to see and wish to see you all next week. In the meantime, please keep safe, keep healthy. Thank you very much.
Well done, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great night.
Thank you. Good night.